Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Trust and Believe. I'm smiling from ear to ear today because, as you all know, I talk a lot about anxiety and stress and mental health in everything that I do, from fitness to nutrition to relationships to past childhood trauma. And a lot of times when I talk about these things, I want to make sure that you don't think that I like talking about sad things. I want you to understand that when you are able to allow less than positive things into your life becomes more abundantly clear. And today we have an incredible guest. I know this person's going to be incredible because not only has she taken up a life of helping people as a mental health specialist, in addition to that, she's also a part of my Unity community. And I know you all know that I love building communities on Facebook and Instagram and just social media in general, and how I bring light to social media instead of keeping it negative. I know you're going to get so much meat and joy about your life from this episode. So get ready to trust and believe.
Somebody say hell yeah!
What's up?
He's better than Oprah.
Come on, y'all. This is Shaun T, and it's time to trust and believe.
Hey, Courtney. Oh my
Hey,
goodness.
Shanti.
Thank you for being here. I have so much to talk to you about, and I'm going to really try to cram it into 45 minutes. And I just want to challenge the listeners before we begin to really pay attention today, almost more than you've ever paid attention before, because there are people out there who are afraid to go to therapy, who are afraid to talk about their internal feelings. And I know that if you just open your mind right now, you're going to get some really great gems from this episode. So I just want to start out, Courtney, by asking you first, can you just tell me about yourself? Before you even tell me about your background, just tell me about you as a person.
First of all, let me just say it's an honor to be here. And you, I'm sure you literally had like thousands or million, even millions of people that you could have picked to do this show, and you picked me. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia,
Yes.
and yes, ATL. And I'm a wife. I have two children. Recently, a homeschooling mom too. Just started this year. Health wise, I've been doing and, eating eating clean and working out regularly for about probably 6.5 years. So, but I have had some slumps. I've had some setbacks. I've had some, some moments where I completely fell off the wagon because I love food. I love to eat.
And that's what I needed the guests to hear. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Before we get into the meat, I'm like,
yes.
listen. And the reason why I wanted you to talk about yourself a little bit first is
Mhm.
because I think a lot of times when people are about to enter a space of talking about
Mhm.
mental health, they sometimes put the therapist on a pedestal and it becomes
Oh yeah.
intimidating for people, which is why people don't want to walk into that room. But therapists are
Mhm.
human too, you
Mhm.
know? Let's dive into mental health because this is something that has been, I think, really put to the wayside, if you will, for a very long time, especially for people like us in the Black community. We have been taught not to talk about these things, or especially as a Black man, it's you are considered weak if you cry. And so I just would love to dive in and tell me about your mental health profession, your education, and then I have some very specific questions after that.
Okay. Well, I got my undergrad at Southern University in Baton Rouge. Go Jags! I took a break. I didn't go directly into graduate school. Most people do. I didn't. Even that turned into a blessing because I ended up working at this psychiatric facility for children and teens for 4 years, and or excuse me, 5 years. And it was like the last stop before jail for some of these kids. So they
Wow.
had severe emotional problems, severe behavioral problems. They really couldn't function in the community in a safe way, to the point where they were a danger to themselves and or others. And a lot of them had, particularly on the girls unit, that's where I spent most of my time there, or that's where I worked most of the time there. And there was a lot of history of abuse, a lot of history of especially on the girls unit, on the girls side, it was a lot of history of sexual abuse, a lot of trauma, and a lot of instability in their families. And I saw some things and experienced some things and had to do some things and learn some things. And I will tell you, it was probably the best move I could have made working in the mental health field. It really, really prepared me for every other job that I took in the mental health field after that, to the point where I tell
Wow.
people coming out of college or out of grad school and they're interested in mental health that you should work in a facility like that for at least 6 months because you're going to learn a lot. I graduated from Southern in 2000. In 2004, I went back to school and got my master's degree from Argosy, and I graduated in 2006, and also had a bunch of circumstances that it took me way longer than what some people usually take to get your full license, your licensed professional counselor, that you're licensed by the state and all that. And I have been fully licensed for about 6 years now. Yeah, 6 years. And
Wow.
so
Congratulations.
thank you. Really working in the mental health field for about 16 years. And yeah, thank you. Yes. And so both at the direct care level, where you're kind of supervising the kids and all of that, and both at the graduate level as a therapist. So I've been doing that. My specialty is trauma. I've been working with people with trauma really for most of my career, and mostly children. And I was working with children at first, and I was kind of like, I'll never work with adults. I'm not going to do that. And it's funny because, and whenever I say I'm never going to do something, God will find a way to laugh in my face and, and make it happen. And that's what happened. I ended up working for a facility where I didn't get to pick, or for a company where they picked out your clients for you. And if they
Wow.
needed, so they you had to go wherever the need was. So if they needed you to work with an adult, then you got to go work with the adults. And that's what
Yeah.
I did. I think it was the best thing ever, because I really, really loved working with adults after that.
I know a lot of people who forgot they had sexual trauma or childhood trauma or emotional abuse trauma. They really have forgotten. And there would be things that trigger it that made them remember. When those things happen, and I talk to them and I say, hey, you should seek out therapy. I think it'd be really great for you. The first thing they say is, I don't want to bring that pain back to my life. What do you say to someone who's afraid to talk about the past when it was a really traumatic experience and they're afraid to enter therapy for it?
I'd say it's completely normal. What you're feeling and how you are looking at the situation, not wanting to talk about it, is completely normal. Just about every client that I have worked with that was in trauma has said that to me in some way, shape, or form at some point in time, or even especially early on. But I will say that, you know, yes, we have to approach it at some point in time, but it's not something we're going to do on the first day. We're not going to do it even on the second session. First, we're going to arm you with some skills and some techniques that'll help you better traverse it. Because right now you can't. I don't want to talk with you about it either right now because you're not prepared for it. So you have to prepare a client for it first,
That was really powerful. And
right?
I just want to thank you for saying that.
When you jump into an ocean or you swim in the ocean, you're just not jumping into the deep end, that you're kind of walking in at toes first, and then eventually you're up above your head. But that takes some time to do. And I'm not going to just drop you into the deep end. We're going to start at the beach, and you're just going to go in toes first.
This section that I'm asking you is really to get people to gain that strength to maybe want to talk to a therapist. So you arm them with some skills, and how does it usually progress to where people feel like they can open up a little more?
Usually someone that's coming into my office that is experiencing or struggling with trauma, they're already they're coming in already kind of stiff, if you will, and already on guard. On guard is the
Mm.
term I was looking for. So they're already on guard, and you're all and there and a lot of times people who experience trauma or struggling with it and never had help to deal with it are going through life on guard all the time, all the time. And so what we have to do first is to teach them how to kind of relax, bring some of that down and relax a little bit, and also tell the difference, establish the difference between a perceived threat and a real threat. Because sometimes we are reacting to things that are perceived. They're not necessarily a threat, but we think it is that way. And people with trauma think a lot often see everything or a lot of things as a threat. And so what we have to do is establish that. What is a perceived threat versus what is a real threat? And what can we do to kind of bring your body relax a little bit so that every time you're triggered or every time you feel upset about something, how can you regulate how you're feeling emotionally and physically? But it starts with physically, because when we're relaxed physically, then we're relaxed emotionally. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I was actually just thinking of in the past, and I got to
Mm,
remember to bring this up later when I ask you another question about something
okay.
else. But in the past, and I've spoken about this in my book, but
Mhm.
in the past, even like if Scott, my husband, were to come up to me and like touch me on my butt as like a gesture of, oh my God, I think it's so nice, or just
Mhm.
like a general affection,
Mhm.
it would send me into a tornado. I can't even
Mm.
explain to you how it would send me so far beyond anything, any
Mhm.
sort of anger. I was like just mad and I wanted to fight right away.
Mm.
And before I really could attach it to anything, it was just always like, no, I just don't like people touching my butt. I just don't like that. And it was, and if
Mhm.
I can be like super, I'm very, you know me, I'm very upfront. Even when
Mhm.
it came to you know, intimacy. Like this is
Mhm.
off limits. Like don't even think, it was just like an off limits everything. Like,
Right.
you know, until I went to therapy and realized
Mhm.
that my molester started out in the middle of the night touching my butt first. That's how I woke up.
Mm.
It was a perceived threat to me when it was it wasn't a threat at all. It was coming from a loving place. But I just wanted to share that with you to like bring some, color to it from my experience.
No, absolutely. And I think it's great that you know that that was a trigger for you, because a lot of people don't know sometimes that things are a trigger, or something is triggering them and it's taking them back to that trauma. We still don't even approach triggers until we do some relaxation first. Relaxation skills, and also what's something called interoception skills. And interoception is really the ability to relax in real time. So with
Um,
relaxations versus with relaxation skills, where you kind of have to disengage from something in order to do it. Like let's say an example of relaxation would be like belly breathing. With interoception, you can do it in real time without disengaging. I have done it while I've been driving a car, and you can do it just that way. And I think that's really good, particularly for people who have trauma, because they are literally dealing with the trauma as it's occurring, or not the trauma, the trigger as it's occurring. And they don't have to disengage. And sometimes you can't do that. You can't go and, sometimes you can't always go off and do belly breathing. With interoception skills, you can do that no matter what you're doing.
and what's an example of that? If you can just give me like a little piece.
Yeah. So one is called wet noodle versus cooked noodle. You can imagine your body as as cooked spaghetti, and that's usually how people are starting off. Because, and you just kind, I just tell invite people to start just being aware of how their body is feeling. So they, give them a couple of seconds to do that, and I said, now imagine your body as um, cooked spaghetti. How does it feel? And pretend that you're cooked spaghetti and just kind of move your body in that direction. And then that's when every muscle in your body, you're relaxing every muscle in your body at the same time. And you can literally do that while you are driving. Whatever you're doing, you can do it without completely disengaging with practice.
It's
But
interesting because the way I look at it is a lot of times when you do get into a space where you feel either attacked or threatened or
mhm,
whatever the case may be, I'm thinking of like the spaghetti that can snap easily because it's hard. But when you
mhm,
like, I didn't think about that. Like, just like move, just like
right.
let your body feel a little more free.
Yeah, because if you really are aware of how your body is feeling, and I learned this in a training a few years ago, that it surprised me how much I was walking around with a rigid muscles all the time. So
Hmm.
you really have to tune into your body and kind of calm it down. And like I said, when your body is calm, your mind is calm. When you're ready to fight, you are leaving the part of your brain that's rational, which is the prefrontal cortex that guides judgment and reasoning and all of that. And then you're going straight into reptilian brain. So this break shuts down, and then you go into reptilian brain mode, which controls any kind of self preserving behaviors, fight, flight, or freeze. So and so that works when you are in a real situation, a real threatening situation. You need to be in reptilian when you're in a real situation. It works. What doesn't work is when you're going into it when you're not in a real a situation that's real threat. You're perceiving it as a threat and you're behaving as it is, and you're going into reptilian. And people who are struggling with trauma are often overly their reptilian brain is being overly used or overly regulated. So the point of doing that is to relax your body, is to also relax your mind, so that you are no longer in reptilian and you're going back into prefrontal cortex, and you can make better choices about what's happening around you.
I would love for you to kind of break down each one, from a professional standpoint, break down anxiety, depression, worry, or whatever other medical terms you could actually use to help people understand if they're listening, this may be what you're going through. And then from there we'll move on to how to, really help them move forward.
I can start with anxiety and worry first, because they kind of go hand in hand, because they fall kind of under the same umbrella. um they're both kind of anxiety rooted. Well, worry is an anxiety rooted condition, pretty much. And so the goal for people with anxiety is to maintain control when they feel like they're losing control. So a lot of times, or to try and avoid situations that they are seeing, or foreseeing, I should say, as something where they might be out of control. And so a lot of times, that's what's happening. And it's developed usually because people may have past life experiences involving some type of loss of control. Whether it could be trauma, but it doesn't have to be just trauma. It could be sudden life changes or experiences of adversity where you actually got through it, but you're going to do whatever is necessary to avoid it again. It leads people who are struggling with anxiety to going above and beyond, um, doing whatever they can in order to maintain that bubble of safety that they perceive for themselves, and to maintain control. It's really about control at the end of the day. And some signs of anxiety might be something like worrying, like you said, worrying a lot. You might feel some physical signs, like every time you think about whatever it is that you're upset about or you're thinking about, you might have some butterflies in your stomach, or may not want to eat, and you might feel a little jittery, a little nervous. You might have a hard time sleeping at night. And I've struggled with anxiety myself, and a lot of times my sleep would be affected by it. There are different types of anxiety diagnoses, so it just depends on what it is. but some of it might just be, like I said, worrying about everything, and also doing a lot of stuff. You might find yourself doing a lot of things to avoid it. So it could be like over planning, something like that, or planning. And I'm a planner sometimes, and some I have to check myself sometimes, because sometimes it is anxiety triggered, and that's when I start to go into over planning mode and starting to develop plan A, B through Z. And
Oh,
so
wow.
you have to just sometimes you have to let it go. And also, and I'm saying that, but it's easier said than done with people who have anxiety. So I don't want to by any means demean someone who has it, because it's not easy to just let it go. If you did, then you wouldn't be having a problem with it.
Right.
So it's not easy, but learning how to let it go is what I probably should have said. But anyway, the also overthinking. So a lot of times people who have anxiety tend to overthink, and that is me all day. Yeah,
Me
yeah,
too.
yeah,
That's when I
yes.
feel that my anxiety exacerbates. Like it goes from like a level one
Mhm.
to a level 1,365,832 to the
Right.
10th power. It just
Yes.
the overthinking and like the scenarios, and
Mhm.
that is when it gets
Mhm.
wild. I do want to also state, like you stated before, if you are a person who are suffering from anxiety or overthinking or worry, it is not easy to get yourself out of that. Because by no means do I want to
Yeah.
say it sounds a little bit easier by being further down the road of being able to manage it,
Mhm.
but it
Mhm.
is incredibly tough
It
to
is.
calm that brain down.
Mhm. Mhm. It is. It is. You're so right. And I struggled with it for a long time too. And there are some times where I still overthink, but thankfully I've had some therapy for it too. Therapists go to therapy too.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah, yeah, we're people too. So I've had some struggles with that. I mean, I've sought therapy for it, but also I have some great people in my life that are like that can say in very kind and loving ways, "I think you're overthinking this," and my husband's one of them. He's a psychiatrist, so
Oh,
he knows it
wow.
too, and yeah, and so he's just like, when I'm kind of going overboard, he's like, I think you're overthinking this a little bit," and so and then and then sometimes I can do it myself. I've learned how to do it myself too, and well, I'm just like, stop.
With your husband, you know where he's coming from. Because I think a lot of times when people are relying on their spouse to help them through it, it becomes more of a tumultuous situation than it does a loving one. And so by you being able to know, it's kind of like you have that person that's able, it's like the angel on your shoulder that's like, that you trust. It's like, I think you might be overthinking this. You're like, you know what? I'm right. Whereas if you aren't there yet, anybody who tells you, I think you might be overthinking this, is like, no, I'm not. Like, this is so real, And so I just think it's good that you brought that up. Like, yeah, you got to have that safe person next to you.
Absolutely. It's good to have someone, that you're at a healthy relationship with, where you can, where you can rely on, that can tell you whether or not you're overthinking. Like, he's one, my mother is one. I have a mentor that has done it before too. When we talk, if I'm overthinking, she'll let me know. So I rely on that, and I'm grateful that I have people who can tell me the truth, and do it in a way that, where I'm not feeling devalued or
Right.
not heard. And so I think that is very important. And other things that people who with anxiety struggle with sometimes is, sometimes relationships and interactions. So some people may avoid social interactions. I've looking back on my life when I was younger, I definitely did that. Avoid social interactions. People who have social anxiety, which I think I had probably some of that too. So they avoid social interactions, or if they do have interactions with people, they're constantly reenacting
Mhm.
what happened or what was said in their head. or I should have said this, or I should have said that, or did that sound weird when I did this, and all of that. Just kind of rehashing it in your brain, and also kind of constantly critiquing it and re-critiquing it. Does that make sense? And
Yes,
so,
yes.
yeah, a lot of times people with anxiety will do that. And then they will also um, do everything that's necessary to kind, like I said, to avoid any kind of bad or negative outcome. So a lot of times when I have people in my office come with anxiety, we just go there sometimes. I'm just like, okay, well, what if the worst happens? And then what? So what is the worst? What's the worst case scenario? Spell it out for me. And they do. Okay, then what? What happens? And so and and okay, well, will you survive it? How do you come out of it? Um, is there anything you can learn from it? If it does, what are the odds of this happening? How many times in this year or this month or whatever, depending on the situation, how it,
Mhm.
of course, how many times has this happened when in this situation? Well, none or one. Okay, so what do you think the odds are of it happening now? And then also, what would you tell a friend or your child or someone else who was struggling with this same thought? What would you tell them? And a lot of
Right.
times, when I use that question, a lot of times people are like, they will tell them the same thing that I would have told them. So it's just
Right,
like,
right.
so yeah, so how come it doesn't apply to you?
I know we're talking about anxiety, but because of time, I do want to talk about depression. Now, the reason why I want to talk about depression, and there, I, especially with my community, I do see it more often than not of people talking about their depression. And to be quite honest, I'm not well versed in it at all. I've never experienced it. Even though I was on depression medication before, I was on depression medication because I thought I was depressed. Me personally, I was just in a relationship and a life space that I wasn't out of. I couldn't get out of. And once I realized that, oh my gosh, when I'm not around that person or in that relationship or in that physical space, I'm like really happy. So I've never really dealt with the pain and the struggle and the mental anguish that comes with people that I know have suffered from depression. And so I just want you to, like, however you want to talk about depression that can help someone either acknowledge that they have it, get help for it, or even if they're currently um dealing with it now. I would love to hear your expertise on some of that.
Sure, sure. Well, first I can start off by talking about kind of what it looks like, breaking down what it looks like. And usually the way depression happens is it's usually when things that used to bring you pleasure, you used to enjoy, you're not enjoying as much anymore. And it can also look like you're feeling sad um more often than not. On more days than not, you're feeling sad. And but it can also look differently on different people, because some people may be severely depressed, others might be mildly. So there are different before I kind of go down the list of what it looks like, just know that for every symptom there is a spectrum. So there are, people that might be really really struggling and with one symptom, and one that's where it's kind of slight but not as severe.
Right.
So it might be something like you're you're either are you eating finding that you're eating less these days, you're not as hungry as you used to be, loss of appetite, or maybe you're eating more. A lot of times people who are depressed tend to eat more carbs, a lot of times, like the comfort foods type
Mhm.
stuff. And so you're eating more. Are you seeing more weight loss? Have you been experiencing some weight loss lately without trying to lose weight? Or have you gained weight? Um, are you what's your sleep like? Are you sleeping? Some people with depression are either oversleep sometimes, or they're not sleeping as much or enough. Um, also, they may have a loss of energy, like physically feel tired or fatigued. So a lot of times, and I've talked to people, if I could pause it for a minute before I go down the list even more and just say this note too. A lot of times I have clients, and I've heard this so often, where they come in and they have people in their lives that say things that are well meaning but not helpful at all to someone who is depressed. So things like, oh well, you just look on the bright side, or you got to get past this, or if you just get out a little bit and you'll be fine. And or even, I'll even go there, I love the Lord, but I will go there, you just need to pray about it. And yes, prayer works. I believe that. Yes. But sometimes the answer to your prayer is professional help.
I do believe, in the Bible, when the Bible says, when two or three are gathered together, like incredible things happen.
Yes.
But that's because, number one, you feel supported, or
Mhm.
even when you're praying, because
Mhm.
a lot of times people say, "Oh, you just got to pray." But I realize that when I'm in a space where I'm praying,
Mhm.
I'm also acting. I'm also taking action on the thing that I'm praying for. So
Right.
so everything you said, yeah, all of those things, you just gotta look on the bright side. You gotta get out more. You gotta
Right.
Why don't you just like that's and it's like, no, people, because if it was that easy, I would have been at the club. I would have been to the club last week.
Right.
You know
It's
what
not
I'm saying?
helpful and it's not kind,
Right.
because now you're assuming that this person is coming from the same um, worldview, or the same point of view as you are, and they're not.
Right.
And also also depression is just not, it's emotionally, because it starts in the brain. So there are chemical imbalances in the brain sometimes that trigger depression. You see it, I've seen studies where there have been brain scans on people who have depression versus people who who are not depressed, and they look different. So that tells you that this is a biological, a medical issue.
One of the things that annoys me
Mhm.
beyond anything, especially when it comes to workplace,
Mhm.
is when someone, has food poisoning and they're sick all day, or if someone comes in with a fever, or they're coughing, or whatever the case may be, people will be like, "Oh, go home, go lay down,
Mhm.
I'll drive you to the ER. Like, this doesn't look right." But when someone comes in and they are mentally stressed, they can't focus, they are having a lot going on. It's like, well,
Mhm.
you got to come in, like, we got to get this done.
Right.
And it just annoys me that mental health isn't viewed or valued the same as physical health. If any of my team, if they were stressed, I'm like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go relax? Do you want to get help?
People with depression go around with masks all the time. What I call it, or what is called in my profession, a mask. So they look happy, they're acting happy, but that's not how they feel. But that's kind of how they're masking their true feelings. Sometimes that's what
Hmm.
happens, and I've had many clients say it, and they've been very good at it. Some of them aren't good at it, and so they're home and all the time, not showering or not eating, things like that. And that's another, those are other signs too, like tasks become too great. You have a hard time starting tasks or completing them.
Hmm.
And a hard time just getting up to actually do the tasks. And you also might have someone who may not be hygiene wise, and their hygiene isn't what it used to be, so they're not showering, they're not getting dressed, things like that. um, or it can be, a lot of times people who are depressed have difficulty making decisions and difficulty with concentration, because they're kind of focused on some of those thoughts that may be triggering the depression. It's hard to kind of get out of that headspace when
Hmm.
you're depressed. It's very hard. And so a lot, because of that, they have a hard time making decisions. You may see this person crying easily, more easily than usual, or than normal. If they're in a relationship, they may not be, their sex drive might be low. and outside of the norm. Maybe before it was pretty normal, but now they're not interested in sex anymore. Plans of suicide, things like that. Sometimes people, when they're depressed, they, tend to go there a little bit in terms of the suicide, or, it may not be suicidal. They might not be suicidal per se, saying I'm going to kill myself, I have a plan, but it might be something like, maybe it'd just be better if I weren't here.
My final question would be, how can you help people trust and believe in the fact that therapy is okay for them?
Well, I'd say that more people seek it than you think. And I am so grateful. I'm so glad that you said that it's been such a taboo in the black community, because you are absolutely right. And I will say I'm happy to say that I have seen some changes in our community in the past, I'd say 5-10 years. But I will also say that it's still kind of ongoing. You still, every once in a while, you hear that one black person is like, "Black people don't do that. We don't go to therapy." And I'm like, yeah, we do. Most of the people I've seen have been black, and and a lot of times they seek me out because I am black. and and then on top of that, I've gone to therapy too, and I know many other black therapists. I belong to a page on Facebook for black therapists. So we're out there, and it's real. And I think you're right, there is a stigma to it. But the thing is, you have to look at it this way, is that we get our bodies healthy every day, with those workouts, that those hard behind workouts that you be kicking my butt every time, sir. But anyway, we do those. We get our minds, we get our bodies in shape, and we do. And in order to do that, it takes consistency, and we have to continually do it to keep it in shape, right? And continually challenge it. Sometimes that's what we have to do with our mind. And sometimes our mind is so completely out of shape and we don't know, and we need a personal trainer for that. And I
Mhm.
think a therapist, not to sound corny, but a therapist is kind of like a personal trainer for the mind, if you will,
It's not kinda, like, it is. It
yeah.
is. I mean, you provide exercises. I mean, you said this a while ago
Hmm.
in the interviews. You really arm people with the foundation
Hmm.
of being able to manage things when they get heavy,
Hmm.
and that's exactly what we do as personal trainers. We're not
Yeah.
asking you to come in and bench 200 pounds on the first day.
Right.
So, it's the same exact thing, and I love that that's how you're able to explain it to people who may be afraid. Like, you work on your body, let's get a personal trainer for your
Right.
mind.
And more people do it than you would think. They just don't tell you. So a lot of people aren't, a lot of people aren't going to tell you that they're in therapy. Sometimes they don't do that. I can't tell you who I've seen in therapy. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
So I
Correct.
can't, I can't do that. But, it is, and I always tell clients, I kind of tell them this to kind of make them smile a little bit, especially if they're feeling a little uncomfortable or nervous. I'm like, listen, everything we're going to do in these sessions and our time together is designed for you to outgrow me, to get to a
Mm.
point where you don't need to come anymore. So let's go ahead and go there. Let's do that. Let's change these thought processes. Let's arm you with the skills where if these automatic negative thoughts are coming into your brain again, which they will, long after you see me, they'll continue to happen because we're humans, and that's what happens. And but at that point, you will be armed with the skills to challenge them on your own.
When you introduce yourself, I love how you
Hmm.
said, "I'm a wife first," because a lot of people say, "I'm a mom first and I'm a wife." And that just really showed me right away that the foundation of your household is you and your husband are a team, and you're like,
Oh,
"We gotta roll
absolutely.
with this." And I just think
Yes.
that's so it just made me really happy because Scott and I always say, I'm like, y'all come second because
Yep.
I need all the support. We need all the support we can
Hmm.
get from each
Hmm.
other so that
Hmm.
you can have an incredible day, week, life, year,
Absolutely.
whatever. And so I don't know. I just wanted to say that. I
Thank
I
you.
smiled on the inside when you're like, I'm a wife, because I'm like, I'm a husband and then I'm a dad.
Exactly. That's how it should be. God, husband or wife, children. That's how it is.
Exactly.
That's how it is in our household. So yeah, thank you.
Courtney Johnson, you are, like I said, beautiful on the inside, beautiful on the outside, and your
Thank
knowledge
you.
has really helped me today. And I'm sure people will absolutely love you.